The morning sun rises over the deserted stretch of road, but what should have been a routine patrol quickly takes a terrifying turn. As Officer Daniels steps from the vehicle, he hears the sharp bark of his K-9 partner, Max, followed by a sudden, deafening explosion. The ground trembles beneath them and chaos ensues. In that instant, time seems to slow. Did Max sense something before the blast? Was he the one who saved his handler's life, or did fate have other plans? Max, a battle-hardened war dog, and Officer Daniels, a seasoned veteran of the K-9 unit, share a bond that goes beyond training. Their connection is a story of trust forged in the fires of danger. But today, that bond is about to be tested in the most unimaginable way. Was the explosion a random act, or something much more sinister? The officer's heart races, and Max's instincts kick into overdrive. But in the midst of the dust and confusion, the question remains: will they survive the deadly aftermath? The clock is ticking, and the real danger is just beginning. Stay with us as the story of loyalty, sacrifice, and survival unfolds. The evening air is thick with tension as Officer Daniels slowly walks into the quiet, sterile confines of the shelter. His military uniform, now faded with the weight of years, hangs loosely on his shoulders. Max, his once trusted K-9 partner, lies in the far corner of the room, eyes closed, tail motionless. The dog's ears twitch at the sound of the door creaking, open, but he does not stir. The officer hesitates, his heart pounding in his chest. This is the moment he's been dreading, yet yearning for, an opportunity to reclaim the bond they once shared. Max had been his faithful companion through countless missions, his presence a silent comfort amid the chaos of war. But now, as Officer Daniels approaches, Max's gaze is distant, unrecognizing. It's as though the dog's memories of their time together have faded, wiped clean by time and trauma. For Officer Daniels, this is a gut-wrenching blow. He had been deployed overseas for months, his time with Max cut short by the unexpected turn of fate that led to his return home. When he left, Max was not just a partner, he was family. They had shared everything: moments of fear, courage, and a bond forged through blood, sweat, and shared danger. Now, the dog that once had responded to his voice and touch with absolute loyalty seems like a stranger. Max's eyes flicker, but he does not rise. Officer Daniels reaches out cautiously, whispering his partner's name in a soft, almost pleading tone. "Max, it's me, your partner." The words hang in the air, desperate, but they seem to bounce off the walls, unheard by the animal he once trusted with his life. As the officer sits on the cold floor, the weight of the moment settles over him. His body aches, not from the physical toll of war, but from the emotional disconnect between him and Max. He cannot understand why the dog no longer recognizes him, but he can see the deep pain in Max's eyes, the confusion, the fear, the anxiety. The dog is not the same anymore. His mind, once sharp and focused, now seems clouded by the toll of his own trauma. Meanwhile, Max's world has changed as well. He had once been in the field, protecting his handler, using his keen instincts to detect danger before it could strike. The bond they shared was powerful, a bond that allowed them to communicate without words. But now, in the safety of the shelter, Max is surrounded by unfamiliar faces and strange smells. His senses, once so attuned to his handler, have become dulled. There are no more alarms, no more commands. There is only silence, only the routine of feeding, sleeping, and waiting for the next command. It is a world where Max feels lost. The environment around them adds to the weight of the situation. The shelter is a place of transition, a place where soldiers and their dogs are meant to be rehabilitated and returned to a semblance of normalcy. But it's also a reminder of everything they have lost. The walls are lined with cages, each holding a soldier's dog, each with a story of its own. Yet in this moment, all Officer Daniels can see is Max, the dog that once protected him from harm, now withdrawn into his own world, trapped by his own experiences. Officer Daniels, though heartbroken, refuses to give up. He knows that Max's past is a heavy burden. The dog has seen things that no animal should ever witness, and the scars of war run deep. But he also knows that there's still a glimmer of hope. He just needs to find a way to reach the dog, to break through the confusion and rebuild the bond they once shared. He rises and begins to walk around the shelter, looking for something familiar, something that could trigger Max's recognition. He stops at the corner of the room, where Max's favorite toy lies forgotten. It's an old, battered ball that had once been a source of endless hours of play. Officer Daniels picks it up, his fingers brushing against the worn leather. A flood of memories rushes back. He can still hear Max's excited barks as they would play fetch in the park, or the way the dog would nudge him playfully when it was time for a break. The officer walks back to Max, holding the ball in his hand, and gently tosses it across the floor. Max's ears perk up, and for a brief moment, there's a flicker of recognition in his eyes. The dog stands and takes a few cautious steps toward the ball, but he hesitates, as if unsure whether he should engage. This is the moment. Small, fragile, but powerful. The emotional stakes are high. For Officer Daniels, reclaiming the bond with Max is not just about nostalgia. It's about healing. It's about finding a way to reconnect, to break through the darkness that has taken over both of their lives. For Max, the stakes are equally high. He has been through so much, and the emotional scars he carries are heavy. But if they can reconnect, perhaps there is a chance for both of them to heal, to move past the trauma and find peace once again. But this is just the beginning. The real challenge lies ahead. Can they truly overcome the distance between them, or has their bond been irreparably broken by the horrors they both witnessed? The emotional journey for both of them will not be easy, but it is one they must take together. And it starts here, in the quiet corner of the shelter, with the soft sound of a ball rolling across the floor. A small step toward healing, a small hope for the future. As Officer Daniels sits on the worn bench inside the shelter, his fingers absent-mindedly tap against his knee, his eyes locked on Max. Time seems to stretch endlessly, but the bond he once shared with the dog refuses to fade from his memory. Each passing day feels like an eternity, and the officer's frustration is starting to boil over. Despite his constant attempts to reach Max, his soft voice, his familiar gestures, nothing has worked. The dog remains distant, aloof, as though his once loyal companion is gone, leaving behind only the shell of a creature that was once full of life and spirit. But amidst the frustration, there's a quiet glimmer of hope. It's there, in Max's. Occasional flicker of attention when Officer Daniels calls his name, or when the officer stands just a little too close and Max's ears twitch ever so slightly. These are the smallest of signs, but they are enough to keep the officer from giving up. He has come too far, fought too hard, and endured too much to let go now. Max's struggle is just as deep. He has always been a creature of instinct, of action. And yet now, in the safety of the shelter, he feels lost. The fear of unfamiliar faces and the uncertainty of his own mind create a sense of isolation he cannot escape. The officer's voice, once a calming presence, no longer brings the comfort it used to. The bond they shared is still there, but it is buried beneath layers of pain and confusion. The tension between them grows, as does the emotional distance. The officer's attempts to reach Max become more frequent, each time more desperate than the last. He calls to the dog, his voice low and soothing, but Max only looks away, disinterested. The officer can feel the weight of the dog's gaze, distant and unyielding. It is a look that says everything. The dog does not remember, or if he does, he is too frightened to show it. On one particularly long day, as Officer Daniels tries again to coax Max into a game of fetch, the dog suddenly turns and trots over to another handler. A pang of jealousy stabs at the officer's heart as he watches Max respond to the new person with a warmth that he has not shown his partner. It's as though the dog has chosen someone else, and the officer is left standing there, abandoned in the silence of his own heartache. This moment of rejection is a harsh reminder of the gulf between them. Max's affection, once reserved solely for the officer, is now freely given to others. Officer Daniels watches from a distance, his face a mixture of confusion, hurt, and a quiet resignation. He has been through so much already, but this rejection, this sense of being forgotten, threatens to undo him. For a brief moment, doubt begins to creep in. Maybe Max will never recognize him again. Maybe their bond is beyond repair. But as the days continue, the officer refuses to let the doubts settle. There are small victories to be found, even in the darkest of times. One evening, as Officer Daniel steps outside for a brief walk, he lets out a familiar, sharp whistle. It's a sound Max used to respond to with unwavering attention, and for the first time since he arrived, the officer feels a flicker of hope. Max's ears twitch, and the dog's head turns, his eyes narrowing as though he's trying to process the sound. There's a hesitation, a pause, and then nothing. The officer's heart sinks, but he does not give up. Over the course of several days, he repeats the whistle each time with more certainty, and each time Max responds just a little bit more. It's the smallest of signs, but for the officer, it's everything. There is something there. The connection is not gone. It's just buried under layers of fear and confusion, waiting to be uncovered. As the officer continues to work with Max, there are flashes of their past together. In a quiet moment, as Max lies on the floor with his head resting on his paws, Officer Daniels remembers the first time they met. The dog was just a pup, eager and curious, and the officer had been skeptical about forming a partnership. But that first day, as the young dog stared up at him with wide eyes, the officer had known that they were meant for each other. They had shared everything after that. Hours of training, dangerous missions, and moments of quiet companionship that only they understood. The officer's mind races with memories. Max chasing after tennis balls, the dog standing guard at his side during late-night patrols, the comforting presence of a partner who understood him without words. The officer closes his eyes, feeling the weight of the memories pressing against his chest. Flashbacks like these come more frequently, each one serving as a reminder of the deep bond they once shared. But they also heighten the officer's frustration. He remembers the dog's warmth, the way Max would nudge his hand for affection, the way he would rest his head in the officer's lap after a long, tiring day. But now, Max is a shell of the dog he once knew. It feels like the dog is slipping further and further away, and the officer's heart breaks with each passing day. Despite the setbacks, there are moments of hope. One morning, as the officer walks into the room, Max is standing near the door, waiting. The officer's heart skips a beat as he notices something. A slight wag of the tail, barely perceptible, but enough to send a surge of warmth through him. For the first time in what feels like an eternity, Max acknowledges him. It's a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. The officer smiles softly, his heart lifting, knowing that the road to recovery is long, but not impossible. But just as things begin to look up, the officer faces a setback. A new handler arrives at the shelter, and Max immediately takes to him. The officer's heart sinks as he watches the dog show affection to this new person. It's as though the bond they shared is being replaced. The officer's jealousy and frustration rise again, but he forces himself to remain calm. He knows this is part of the process, part of the healing. Max's trust has been shattered, and it will take time to rebuild. Throughout this phase, the emotional stakes grow. The officer's determination is tested. The emotional arc becomes more intense as the officer faces repeated setbacks, but each setback is followed by small signs of progress. The bond between them is still there, but it is fragile. requiring patience, understanding, and time to restore. The journey of reconnection is long and filled with moments of doubt, frustration, and hope. But as each day passes, the officer continues to fight for his partner, refusing to let go of the belief that Max will come back to him. The challenge is daunting, but the emotional journey has only just begun. The shelter feels quieter than ever, the air heavy with the weight of unspoken words and unresolved emotions. Officer Daniels stands near the back of the room, watching Max from a distance. The dog, as usual, lies curled in the corner, eyes distant and unfocused. It has been weeks since they first reunited, and despite the small signs of progress, Max's flicker of recognition, the soft wag of his tail on occasion, the true moment of connection has eluded them. The officer can feel the frustration gnawing at him, the doubt creeping in. Has the bond they once shared been irreparably broken? Will Max ever truly remember him? But today feels different. There's something in the air, an unspoken shift, a tension that hums between them. Officer Daniels takes a deep breath and approaches the dog, his movements deliberate yet calm. This time, he does not speak immediately. He simply stands there, just within reach, his presence steady but not forceful. He lets the silence hang, giving Max the space to decide if he wants to engage. The officer's heart beats loudly in his chest, a mixture of hope and fear, as he watches the dog closely. Max lifts his head slowly, his eyes squinting as he tries to make sense of the officer's presence. There is no immediate recognition, but the dog's gaze lingers on him longer than usual, as though something is stirring deep inside. The officer remains still, knowing that he cannot rush this moment. The emotional breakthrough, if it happens at all, must come from Max, not from any forced gesture or command. And then it happens. Max's ears twitch, the slightest movement but enough to catch the officer's attention. The officer steps closer, his breath catching in his throat, crouches down, his eyes meeting Max's. For the first time, Max holds the officer's gaze and something shifts. The dog's eyes widen just for a moment and then a small wag of the tail. It is slow, tentative, but unmistakable. The officer's heart skips a beat as the dog rises to his feet, his movements cautious but purposeful. Max takes a few steps forward, his eyes never leaving the officer's. The officer's pulse quickens. This is the moment he's been waiting for. In one fluid motion, Max closes the gap between them. The officer kneels down to meet him, his hands trembling as he reaches out. Max's muzzle touches the officer's hand, warm and familiar. For a long moment, neither of them moves. The officer closes his eyes, overcome with emotion. The connection is undeniable. It's as though all the months of frustration, fear, and doubt have been washed away in an instant, replaced by the deep, unwavering bond they once shared. Max's tail begins to wag more freely now, the motion growing in speed. As the dog leans into the officer's touch, the officer places his hand gently on Max's head, feeling the familiar warmth, the texture of his fur. It is as if a dam has broken inside both of them. Years of memories, of trust, flooding back to the surface. The officer's heart swells, with emotion, his eyes misting over. He had feared that he would never experience this again, that Max would never recognize him as the partner he once was. But here they are, together once more. The officer's voice catches in his throat as he whispers the words he has longed to say. "It's me, Max. It's me, your partner." Max's tail thumps against the floor in response, each wag a confirmation, each movement a testament to the connection that has never truly been lost. But just as the officer begins to breathe, a sigh of relief, something unexpected happens. Max pulls away, his tail still wagging, but there is a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. The officer watches, confused, as Max begins to pace in small circles. The officer calls out softly, "Hey, Max, it's okay." But Max does not respond immediately. For a brief, gut-wrenching moment, the officer fears that the dog has slipped away again, that the recognition was fleeting, an illusion born from his desperate hope. Max stops pacing, his eyes darting around the room, his ears flicking back. The officer steps forward slowly, careful not to overwhelm the dog. This is the moment where doubt could creep back in, where all the progress could come undone. The officer's heart races, and for a split second he wonders if the bond is still fragile enough to break. But then Max turns back to face him, his gaze steady this time. The officer kneels again, extending his hand toward Max, his voice gentle but firm. "It's okay, Max. I'm right here." Max inches forward, his eyes narrowing as he takes in the officer's scent, the familiar tone of his voice. The dog's body relaxes, his tail wagging a little faster, more confidently. And then, in a final moment of recognition, Max places his head in the officer's lap, his body relaxed, fully trusting once more. The officer's hand moves automatically, scratching behind Max's ears in the way that has always brought comfort to the dog. The officer feels the weight of everything that has led to this moment. His time in the military, the wars they fought together, the months apart, and it all feels like it has led to this one, perfect moment of reunion. Tears well up in the officer's eyes as he gazes down at the dog, his heart swelling with love, relief, and triumph. They have made it. The bond that was tested by time, trauma, and distance is now stronger than ever. But even as the officer allows himself to savor the moment, a small part of him holds on to the uncertainty that comes with healing. The scars of war are not easily erased, and the emotional journey for both him and Max is far from over. The recognition is a breakthrough, but it is not the end. It is a new beginning, one filled with the possibility of healing, trust, and a future together. But as they sit there, the officer's hand resting on Max's head, he knows that the road ahead will not always be easy. The emotional scars are still there, hidden beneath the surface. But today, they have taken a significant step toward healing. And that is enough, for now. The days following their emotional breakthrough are quieter. Officer Daniels spends his time with Max in the shelter, the bond between them slowly growing stronger with each passing moment. While the deep connection that once existed between them is still being rebuilt, there is a sense of peace that was not there before. It is a peace born from understanding that the healing process for both of them would take time. But the journey has begun, and that is what matters. Max is no longer the distant, confused dog that had walked past him without so much as a glance. The wag of his tail is more frequent now, and the moments of affection, though still brief, are genuine. Officer Daniel sees the flickers of the dog he once knew, alert, eager, and loyal, starting to resurface. The veteran knows that Max is not the same dog he left behind, but he also knows that this new version of Max is still capable of love, loyalty, and trust. As they walk together, side by side, Officer Daniels cannot help but reflect on the distance they have traveled. The road has been long, filled with doubts, setbacks, and emotional heartache. But the last few weeks have brought him an understanding of something he had not fully grasped before. Healing is not about returning to the past. It is about moving forward, learning to accept the scars, and finding a new way to live with them. The journey of recovery is not just one of physical healing. It is deeply emotional. The bond they share is not the same as it once was, but it is strong in a new way. Both Max and Officer Daniels have faced the ghosts of their past, each of them struggling to reconcile the pain and trauma they carry. For the officer, the scars of war and loss are not something that can be erased, but rather something to learn from. He has come to understand that healing is not linear. It is a process, a series of small steps that lead to greater understanding, empathy, and connection. Each moment with Max is a step in that process, a reaffirmation that the bond they shared was never truly lost. It was simply waiting to be rediscovered. For Max, the journey is just as transformative. The dog, who had once been so attuned to his handler's presence, who had fought alongside him in the chaos of war, is now learning to trust again. The fear and confusion that had clouded his mind have not completely disappeared, but they are no longer as overpowering. Max's world is still one of uncertainty, but each day he finds the strength to face it. His hesitation, once a symbol of his trauma, is now a testament to his resilience. He has learned, as the officer has, that trust can be rebuilt, and second chances are possible. In the quiet moments they share, sitting together on the floor of the shelter, walking in the nearby park, or simply lying side by side, there is a sense of peace. There are no grand declarations, no dramatic moments of reconciliation. There is simply the understanding that they are not the same people or dogs they once were, but they are stronger for it. Their bond is different now, but it is no less significant. In fact, it may even be more meaningful, having weathered the trials they have faced together. Officer Daniels watches Max as he sits on the grass, the dog's gaze fixed ahead, ears perked at the sound of a distant bird call. The officer smiles, softly, a sense of quiet pride swelling in his chest. Max looks back at him for a brief moment, and in that moment, the officer sees it. The trust, the recognition, the connection they had fought so hard to restore. It may not be the same as it once was, but it is real. It is enough. The officer stands, his movements slow and deliberate as he stretches his legs. He turns to Max, who rises in sync with him, their movements now fluid, in tune with one another. Together, they begin to walk toward the edge of the park, their path unspoken but understood. There are no guarantees for the future. The road ahead will undoubtedly have its challenges, but for now, there is peace in the present. They have made it through the hardest part, the emotional breakthrough, the healing, the trust. The rest, as the officer knows, will come in time. As they walk, Officer Daniels reflects on what they have learned through their journey. There is no simple resolution to the trauma they have faced, but there is growth, both for the dog and the veteran. They have learned that healing is not just about finding a way back to what was lost. It is about finding a way forward, about discovering new paths and new beginnings. Max, once a soldier's companion in the field, is now his companion in life, his partner in the truest sense of the word. There is no rush. There is no pressure. There is only the understanding that the bond between them is not defined by the past, but by the choices they make in the present. Officer Daniels has learned that love and loyalty are not things that can be taken for granted. They are earned through effort, patience, and vulnerability. Max has learned that trust can be fragile but also resilient. He has learned that even in the darkest of times, there is always the possibility of new beginnings. The officer stops at the park's edge, turning to look at Max one last time before they head back to the shelter. The dog's eyes meet his, steady and calm, and for the first time in a long while, Officer Daniels feels the weight of his heart lighten. They may not have all the answers, and the future may still hold its uncertainties, but they are no longer walking through it alone. As they walk back toward the shelter, side by side, there is a sense of closure. The healing is far from complete, but it is a start. The journey continues, but it is one they will face together, as partners, as friends. And in that understanding, there is peace. If you believe in the power of second chances and the unbreakable bonds of loyalty, then this story is for you. Max and Officer Daniels have proven that, no matter the obstacles, trust and love can be rebuilt. They have shown us that healing is not a straight path, but with patience, understanding, and a willingness to fight for those we love, anything is possible. If this story touched your heart, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more emotional tales of resilience redemption, and hope. We would love for you to join our journey as we continue to share the stories that inspire and remind us all that it is never too late for a second chance. Leave a comment below and tell us your thoughts on the bond between humans and animals. What other stories of loyalty and love would you like to hear? Remember, every story has the potential to change the world, and your support helps us bring more of these powerful moments to life.